One of the worst words would be the word slavery. Can you imagine what it would be to be a slave? And yet so many of us, let's think about it, are slaves of very, very powerful things. We need mercy. We're trying to understand God. We're trying to understand especially Jesus Christ and how God enters into our life and brings us help. One of the problems of life is that even though we're longing for nice things to happen, we run into dead-end streets oftentimes. We don't know where to turn. We have to raise a white flag and say, help, somebody. And this is kind of the bottom line of that word that we're going to use today, and it's the word mercy. Mercy happens when there's no way out. You don't know where to turn. You don't know how to be able to get an impossible situation into something which is a living and a loving situation. Well, what is mercy? Let's think about that word mercy. We use it often. Well, a definition says that it's being kind and forgiving. Mercy isn't necessarily compassion because, well, compassion is just a thing that stops, but mercy is a thing that's a verb. It's active. Mercy goes out and it does something. It allows things to happen, and especially it's about pardon and reconciliation. Now, I'm going to throw some definitions of mercy out, and I'm going to ask that you think about these words and see if maybe they can give you some understanding about what's going on. The Hebrew word, and this comes from the Old Testament, it's a word that sounds a little strange, but it's hesed. And then there's another word, it's a rachamim. God reaches out and loves us, especially when things are tough, when we don't know where to go, we're at our wits' end. God comes and gives mercy, and especially when we find ourselves overwhelmed with sin, overwhelmed with all kinds of brokenness in our life, God comes in with pardon, and God comes in with reconciliation. One of the fascinating things as I was studying this word mercy is that this word rachamim comes from a root word in Hebrew, and it's rachem. And what's fascinating about the word rachem means, in Hebrew it means a woman's womb. Isn't that fascinating? God's love is like the tenderness of a mother caring for a child that's in her womb. I don't know about you, but sometimes my understanding of God can be, he can be so frightening. He's the judge. He's going to get me, and all the things that I've done wrong can just stand up and it just goes, and I can be humiliated. But then this word comes in, and that image of God like a mother loving the child in the womb is the beautiful gift of God's loving me and loving you right now. The other word is a Greek word, and it's the Greek word is called eleos. In the Catholic Church, we say Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy, at the beginning of Mass, and that's where that word comes from. And the eleos really means oil. It's oil. Can you imagine? One time I got a chance to have a massage. It was a great thing. I laid down on a table and this lady came in, and she had powerful hands, but as she worked through my back, I could feel she poured oil on my back and then started to move through those tight muscles up in my shoulder and in my back. Whoa, there was a real soothing, and there was a blessing that happened in that, a relaxation. And for the Greeks, they used that word eleos, which was related to oil, saying, that's what God is like you. God wants to come to you when your life is all tied up and you're all confused and you don't know where to go and you're crying out for somebody to help you. God comes and says, I want to come like a masseuse, if you will. And I want to move through your back. And I want to move through your shoulders. And I want to allow you to be able to have peace and relaxation. I like that very much. That's what mercy really means. That's what we're looking for from God, isn't it? We're looking for God to be able to help us when we get so tired of living in our own life and living in our own world and trying to do things the way we want. We need God with God's power to come in and open up the door and bring us the peace and bring us the love and pour the oil, the oil onto us and saying, relax, relax, I've got you. I've got you, I love you, and I'm never going to let you go. So, we've got this Hebrew word, which hesed, and then this rachamim, and we're talking about a womb of a mother tender to that, and then we're talking about eleos, and we're talking about oil from the Greek word, and it means soothing and caring for us. Then we come to the Latin, and also coming into the Spanish, and it's the word misericordia. Misericordia. In Spanish, it's fascinating because it is two words. It means miseria, which means pain, and then it says cordia, which means heart. Pain in the heart. Isn't that fascinating? Think about that for just a moment. Have you ever had a pain in the heart? I don't mean that you had a bad pizza or whatnot and that you've got that kind of pain, but I'm talking about a pain of perhaps losing someone, or perhaps the pain of not really knowing that you're loved and knowing that you're forgiven and knowing that you really have somebody that cares for you, that loves you, that wants to embrace you and hold you in the midst of your brokenness and your pain. Misericordia, that word, says someone has a pain in their heart, and the pain is for the pain of someone else, the suffering of someone else. So I see you hurting, and instead of just walking by and saying, well, I've got other things to do, I stop and not just listen to you, but I allow my heart to kind of just, I kind of start letting my heart beat with your heart, and we start beating together, and there's a union, and all of a sudden your pain, and this is what's crazy about when you really love someone, your pain becomes my pain. And I take on your pain, and I allow your pain to be part of me. And that's what it really means to get right down to the heart of the whole thing. You see the connection between the two? Misericordia, pain, suffering, and we all know that pain, all kind of stuff. There's all kinds of pain. But the real mercy is the heart that reaches out and makes a bridge between those kind of pains. That's what we're about. Isn't that marvelous? I hope that here I am going through all these definitions, and I hope that isn't just kind of turning you off. But listen to the Hebrew word, and listen to that image of a mother's womb, and listen to the Greek word, which is the oil. And imagine lying down and someone coming and massaging you with oil, maybe with warm oil, and letting all those muscles in your back and in your shoulders, let them be soothed. And then the beautiful thought of misericordia. Imagine reaching out, touching you so much in whatever is going on in your life, and all the pain and the struggle. You don't know where to go, you don't know what to do. It's financial, it's relationship, it's physical, there's a health problem, all these things that are going on, and you don't know where to go. Help, And Misericordia says, God comes and says, listen, I am willing to share your pain. Ba-dum. And so as God listens to us and works with us, God is actually living with us in that pain. And he gives us his heart. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that love so great? And that's what I think of when I come into the Catholic Church, and there's a cross, and there's a man nailed on a cross. Nailed on a cross. Well, that's a terrible thing to have in a church. What's that in a church? But you know what that is? That's God saying, hey, I know your pain. I'm one with you. Lent is a somber time of negation and sacrifice. It's a time of fasting, penance, and almsgiving. During this time of preparation and stock-taking, we would like to offer you a special gift for your gift of $15 or more, a handcrafted crucifix. Each of these crucifixes has been handcrafted by Deacon Jim Weber with ultimate care and love. Made of a single piece of wire, it's exquisite in its detail and beauty. Get this for yourself and for your loved ones. And may this be a reminder of the love and sacrifice of the Lord for each one of us as we prepare to celebrate the great feast of Easter, the feast of our redemption. Use the telephone number or the email on the screen to contact us right now. May this be a sign of joy forever for you and the ones you love during this Lent and after. I'm talking about the word mercy, and I'm going back to the Hebrew, and I'm giving you an image of, in the Old Testament, what really is it about is the word of a woman's womb, the presence of that child in the womb. And then there's that wonderful image of oil, of eleos, oil, and soothing us. And that's what God wants to do to you today. This is what this God show is all about. This is what Christianity is all about. God breaking into our lives and giving us an answer to the unanswerable questions of your life, to the dead-end streets, to the things that you don't know. And God wants to say, I've got an answer. I've got a solution. And that beautiful image of the word misericordia. Misericordia. Pain and the heart. And God is actually willing to share our pain, become one with us in the pain of where we're going through. God's heart is just reaching out to us and loving. But one of the most important things about the word mercy is we got to make sure that we just don't relegate it to God. And I know that's great. God is mercy, and here I'm giving you all these words. But in many ways, I think we've got to remember that God is empowering you and me to be instruments of God's mercy. That's important to remember. Mercy is something, oh God, come with your mercy. Yes, God comes with mercy, but God uses you and me. And so you and I are called upon to be people of care for people that are hungry, care for people that don't have enough clothes, care for people that are in prison. And we become the instruments of God's mercy. So it's like, isn't it fascinating? It's like there's a balance happening. God's mercy comes And God is inspiring you and me to do what we can to bring mercy to people that are hurting. And I want to give you some instances of where this dead-end street, where this cry out for mercy seems to be so very important. And I want to first say a word that is rather painful. It's the word slavery. The whole thought of being sold, of being in control by another person, by being pushed around and taken care of, boom, 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 by another person. Not having freedom to be able to think what I want, to do what I want, to feel what I want. That is slavery. And you and I can look at that and we can say, oh yeah, that's terrible. And that happened last century and whatnot. And yet we know that it can happen today. The United Nations tells us that the numbers of people who are slaves today is greater than it was back in the 1800s or even the 1700s, when it seemed that slavery was just this big thing of slaves being brought from Africa and other places. It's actually worse today, that there are people who, through the sex trade and through the desire to be able to have servants that are going to work for them or whatnot, get a hold on them and control them, and they're not able to have the freedom of what you and I long for. Whew, talk about needing mercy. Talk about needing mercy. What about all these people that are suffering? And we hear quite often of the situation of hostages. Someone is walking down the street and a gang comes over and takes them away and holds them hostage in order to get money. And imagine if all of a sudden you in your world all of a sudden are just living and then boom, all of a sudden somebody comes and takes you away. Whoa! There's a great feeling of slavery, and we're just abhorrent to that. I'm going to give you another situation that might seem a little bit difficult, but I'm talking about marriages. There are situations where people, a husband or wife, or even the children, can find themselves into a controlled slavery situation. They're not able to think, they're not able to act, they're not able to be the people they know that God has created them for. And they struggle with the reality of slavery. I'm asking you to think about this because I want you to think about the importance of the word mercy. Mercy comes when no solution is available. God comes in, and you and I, working with God, work about freeing people from this human trafficking, and we should be fighting all we have to overcome this great, pervasive evil in our world, to do what we can against hostages and situations that allow that to happen, and even to work in terms of marriages where there's a prison, there's an inability to be able to find out who I am under the wonderful guise of love. Well, there's another dead-end street, and that's the dead-end street of addictions. There's a wonderful man who's written a book. His name is May, and it's called Addictions and Grace. I've read it many times, and I love it. And one of the points this psychiatrist makes, he's a Christian psychiatrist, is that we can talk about addictions with regard to, there's drugs and there's alcohol and there's pornography and whatnot, and they're kind of like the big addictions, and we can see that. But May makes the point that we got to be careful that we just don't push off addictions to those experiences. And he says, we're all addicted. When he said that, as I was reading the book, I became rather indignant and said, well, I don't have that big drinking problem. I don't have that drug problem, like this, this. But then I started listening to some of his examples I said, "Ooh, we can get addicted. We can become a slave," and that's, we're talking about slavery in the first part, but addictions can be a form of slavery, can it? You're caught up in sugar, television, power, control over other people. Whoa. That can come out of such an insecurity that you have in your own heart that you're going to dominate that other person, and you got to make sure that they're in control. And you can do it quietly, or you can do it with shouts and even with physical force. One of the struggles that's going on in a big way today with regard to addictions is the word pornography. Nowadays, with computers and with iPads, there's access to pornography in a very, very powerful way. And I'm aware of this situation. And interestingly, the bishops of the United States are also aware of this, and they've written a beautiful document highlighting this terrible, terrible plague that is on our lives. And this is a form of slavery. It's a form of addiction. To be able to say that becomes the way of getting into my life. And what are addictions? Well, addictions are slavery, but in many ways, addictions are this deep desire to fill up in my own life the things that are empty. And so in my loneliness, I'm looking for those things. Well, what about, okay, we talk about slavery, we talk about addiction. What about this word that we say, original sin? Ooh, big word, A big word that sometimes we can just kind of throw off and say, well, it doesn't mean, but when you kind of allow yourself to get down into the depth of it, what we're talking about is that you and I are inclined to evil. There's something in us that wants to turn away from the commandments of God, that wants to turn away from the commandments of the church. And there's something in us that can even be happy when we might ruin our own life or ruin the life of someone we love, or even step away from God and move away from that reality in our life. Wow. What's that evil? And unless we look at that and we face it as a real force in our life and say, wait a minute. Can I go down that road of evil, or should I go down the road of following Christ and the law and loving God and loving my neighbor as myself? Can I do that? Well, a lot of times I think we can find ourselves at a dead-end street. We can't break away from that. The evil becomes overpowering. Well, I'm gonna come back to you in just a moment. Would you stay tuned? And as you're listening, I'm going to share some special messages. But I want to bring this all together again and hope that this beautiful word mercy is going to touch your heart with blessings and peace and even joy. Lent is a somber time of negation and sacrifice. It's a time of fasting, penance, and almsgiving. During this time of preparation and stock-taking, we would like to offer you a special gift for your gift of $15 or more, a handcrafted crucifix. Each of these crucifixes has been handcrafted by Deacon Jim Weber with ultimate care and love. Made of a single piece of wire, it's exquisite in its detail and beauty. Get this for yourself and for your loved ones. And may this be a reminder of the love and sacrifice of the Lord for each one of us as we prepare to celebrate the great feast of Easter, the feast of our redemption. Use the telephone number or the email on the screen to contact us right now. May this be a sign of joy forever for you and the ones you love during this Lent and after. I hope that you had a chance to think about this word mercy. I think it's really important. Pope Francis has said, I want a whole year dedicated to the topic of mercy. A beautiful word. And think about it as when God enters into our life and saves us when we're on a dead-end street. We don't know where to go. Everything is lost. We can say, Lord, please, mercy, mercy. And then remember the importance of mercy not being only in God's hands, but God empowers us to be instruments of bringing that mercy. So it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I've spoken to you about slavery, all the aspects of slavery, addiction, and even this thought of the sin, the evil that's in us, and that sometimes we find ourselves unable to get away from it. It controls us. We say, Lord, please bring mercy. And then maybe we start talking with someone, and that person, maybe a counselor, maybe a friend, and we understand slavery is not the way to go. The addictions, struggling to overcome that, and even to struggle with the evil that we know that's in our own hearts, and doing that. Now, I don't know about if you know this, but in this ministry, we have a web page, and there you can see the address. It's wordnet.tv. Go to the web page often. You can watch the television show whenever you want, and you can watch the daily app that we do, the iGod Today, that free app. You can do that. And I want you to join with me as we're going to be praying for your program, praying for her son, that he can continue with his excellence in school and keep on being focused. And here's another one, Julia from Oregon, asking God to give her strength to overcome the feelings about the son who has died. He died of suicide. Yeah. Kathy from Pennsylvania, a job. She's a single mom trying to raise her sons. Her husband has left her for another woman, and one of her sons is in prison. Lord, please give us your mercy. And may Jesus' love for you always make you smile.